Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistel, joined by my co-hosts Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott. And tonight we welcome very special guest, the Dynasty Deviant himself, Chris Burns. We will be breaking down our bussin', discussing, and mid players heading into week 13, debating LB's Bobby Okereke. I think I got that one right. Terrell Bernard, running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs versus Bijan Robinson, Christian Watson versus Jahan Dotson in our fantasy flex off, and discussing our panic button players for week 13. And ring the alarm. Let's get it popping. Welcome, everybody, to the show. First off, everybody in the chat, hello. We see your messages. If you got any questions for us, drop them, and we will answer them live on the show. But first, fellas, week 13 is here. 2 more weeks of the fantasy regular season, and we got an ace up our sleeves here on Fourth and Frames with Chris Burns, Mr. Tootsie Roll, the Dynasty Deviant himself. What's good, brother?
It's a beautiful day. I'm so happy to be with you guys. Like for the first time, first of many, I hope.
Yes,
I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be a good show.
Yes, sir. Fellow Chris B, I must add, so you're always welcome on the show. Rhett Drew, you got any questions for the Dynasty Deviant?
Only thing I want to ask the Dynasty Deviant is if he has any experience in salary cap Dynasty games, and if he doesn't, why not?
I do not, and the reason why I just never got around to it. Is that a sufficient answer?
I'm gonna put you on. There's a site I like to play on. We'll talk about it later, but it is good stuff, and you'll probably get addicted. But it's up there. It's a learning curve.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with it either. With it either, Chris. So don't feel bad, man.
Okay.
They're scared. They're scared.
How's your Scott Fishbowl tournament going, Chris? You're in, right? You made it to the second round.
Yes, it did. My team, they showed out pretty good, even though I lost Mark Andrews the week before. Had a pretty good week. And I advanced to the second round. I think it's might be a little tough because of buys are back this week. So hopefully it lowers the curve a little bit and I can sneak on in there for another week.
Attaboy. It's 6 rounds of playoffs. Is that right? 4 wild cards and then the semi and then the finals. Is that how it works?
I don't know. I'm just riding that Tootsie Roll wave.
Just win, baby. Just win, baby.
That's right.
It's been pretty good. I don't know if any of you guys, I know the other 2 guys don't really play college fantasy, but the college fantasy season is over. I'm pretty depressed about that, but I did take home a healthy amount of hardware, so that's exciting. But that's it. Time to concentrate on the home stretch of the NFL. So let's get into the fantasy news and injury headlines. All right, a couple big pieces of news around the NFL. Jonathan Taylor with the thumb injury, out 2 to 3 weeks, going for surgery. Chris, are you starting Zach Moss at all this week versus the Tennessee Titans?
I am not starting Zach Moss this week against Tennessee Titans just because, that front that they've put up, been tough to run on. Although Zach, he has exceeded everybody's expectations this year. When Taylor was hurt, on the pup list beginning of the season, nobody was expecting Zach Moss to come in there and be one of the top 5 running backs in the league.
Sure.
Even when Taylor came back, nobody was expecting Moss to have any type of relevance, and he dominated that first game back. So I feel like at this point you might have to play him if you got him. But I'm avoiding him if I need to for this first week.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's so tough, too, because the way Jonathan Taylor was playing, he was turning in to this league winner right in front of our eyes, and then to have him go down 2 to 3 weeks. And then he's going to be coming back right at the time when you need them, but you're not going to be able to really trust them during the fantasy playoffs. It's going to be one of those situations where if you have a trade deadline that's coming up or you don't have a trade deadline at all, he might be a player that you try to move off your roster to try to secure up some depth. Also, tomorrow, Thursday Night Football, Kenneth Walker with the oblique injury is doubtful. Drew, are we starting Zach Charbonnet with confidence?
I think you have to start him. Confident is another story. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Over the last 8 weeks, if you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the running back, Dallas is the 11th toughest matchup for running backs. So the matchup isn't ideal, but with no Kenneth Walker, the volume's going to be there. So I would find it tough to imagine you have enough solid options at this point in the season with all the injuries and stuff we've dealt with to where you can't start him. But I think a big game is probably something that we're just going to have to hope for, not necessarily be confident about.
Yeah, that ASOC is a killer, man. Chris Olave dealing with the concussion injury. Also, Michael Thomas put on the IR. We had Rashid Shaheed go down with thigh injury. Rhett, New Orleans Saints fan. If you have A.T. Perry, this is the week to start him. But Lynn Bowden did kind of emerge as a target in that backfield and in the passing game. Are you rolling with Lynn Bowden at all this week?
I would tread lightly with Lynn Bowden. I will talk some Derek Carr a little bit later because, we are going to get there. But I will say this. If you have Jawan Johnson or Alvin Kamara this week, Alvin Kamara has already had 2 games with over 12 targets this year. So this week with all these receivers out, who knows how many targets Alvin Kamara is going to get. I've seen some people have him as their RB1 for the week, which considering the volume he's probably going to get this week with the carries, plus the targets he's going to get in the passing game is not a bad call at all.
Yep, fair. And then Demario Douglas with the concussion did leave the game last week. Not sure whether his status is going to be him dressing this Sunday. Amari Cooper did have the x-rays come back negative for his ribs, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is in concussion protocol for the Cleveland Browns. That's a bulk of the most important injuries around the NFL. The most important one is the Kenneth Walker injury for Thursday Night Football. We got a question here from Chasing Ships. Does Aaron Rodgers really make it back? Chris, does he make it back? And if he does make it back as a fantasy asset, are you starting him? Are you trusting him? Or are you just letting your league mates pick him up and let them have to deal with that worry?
Yeah, so first thing I don't know if he's coming back. I mean, so if it truly was an Achilles tear, like 79 days and he's back to like doing football activity and everything, it just seems kind of hokey to me. Now, I know he is not a subscriber to Western medicine. Like he does his own thing, like the ayahuasca and darkroom retreats might really be that jam. I don't know. But if he does come back, no, I'm not trusting him. To be honest, I wasn't trusting him before the season. Like I thought that he was cooked his last year in Green Bay.
Yeah.
Watching him on Hard Knocks, I was like, this team is in a lot of trouble because they're treating him like a savior versus making this team better, which when he gets like taken out on, the first play of the game and they don't have him, you see how rudderless they are and why they look so terrible. It's because they weren't preparing. They were just worshiping what Aaron Rodgers used to be. So yes, I hope he does come back. And I hope whoever I'm playing in these championship games is starting him. And he goes out there and then in Aaron Rodgers fashion is like, oh, I'm too big for this. I don't care. And he just like retires like in the huddle,
he does the Antonio Brown.
The Antonio Brown impression.
Yeah, exactly.
Antonio Brown. Was it Vernon Davis or Vontae Davis that retired?
Vontae
Davis started at halftime.
I will say this about Aaron Rodgers, though, is that, and I saw this tweeted out today, too. I mean, we were freaking out a couple years ago. Cam Akers did come back in 5 months, and he was doing lateral cuts and all these different things. Like, he was playing a position where that junk mattered. And, I get it. Cam Akers is a lot younger, but it also speaks to the fact that Western medicine, the aforementioned Western medicine, really has come a long way, and those injuries really aren't as damning as they used to be. So if you're going to tell me that Cam Akers can come back after 5 months and make jump cuts, that Aaron Rodgers can't come back in 4 months, get it out quick in the shotgun, and, try to avoid contact as much as possible. I mean, I'm not saying it's a definite, but I'm saying that it's not impossible.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. It's a greater than 0% chance that he can come back.
They're 4-7 right now. I can't imagine them coming back. I can't imagine them coming back if they don't have a chance of making the playoffs. Now I don't know where they stand in terms of how the whole playoff.
They'd have to win the
but
next 3 games. They'd have to sweep.
Tim Boyle, baby, let's get it.
I would say they'd have to be in a position to at least compete for a playoff spot.
The next 3 are the Falcons, Texans, and Dolphins. Like, forget about it. Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, they're not winning. They're not beating the Texans and the Dolphins.
They're not beating the Falcons. They're not winning in practice.
Well, I'll be rooting for them. I'll be rooting for them to beat the Falcons, but
yeah, me and you both, buddy. But we know it ain't gonna happen. That's a lot. Hey, Kirk Cousins, you're on the clock, Kirk. You're on the clock. Aaron Rodgers is here. Kirk Cousins, you're on the clock, brother.
Speaking of Kirk Cousins,
should I start Justin Jefferson from Slade? Rhett? There's been a couple weeks now. He's coming back. Questionable. He might come back. He's not playing. Might come back. He's not playing. Said this week that he's playing. Uncertainty with the quarterback position there, with the coach coming out saying that he's not committed to Dobbs. Are we starting?
And that's what I'm getting at, is the fact that, even with the quarterback questions, with Josh Dobbs, you can at least rely on a little more of a progression. If it is somebody like Jaron Hall who's starting at that point, we had this talk last week about Jamar Chase and Jake Browning, is the fact that these younger quarterbacks tend to lock in on that one guy. And if that one guy is the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, I have to imagine that the volume would be there, and you kind of have to start him with confidence at that point.
Yeah. Chris, you starting Jefferson?
If Jefferson's on the field, I'm starting him. It's one of those, I subscribe to start your studs, and he is like top shelf. Like, I'm starting him. If I'm out there playing quarterback, I'm still starting him. So, like, if he's playing, put him out there.
I like it. Drew, with the fact if Justin Jefferson does play and Josh Dobbs is the quarterback, knowing the history that how much he does target his tight end, is Jordan Addison at that point a bench player?
I think he would be teetering on that. Yeah. I'm trying to find who do they play this week?
I think, are they on bye? I think they might be on bye, actually.
Yeah, they're on bye this week.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Don't start Jefferson.
So don't start Justin Jefferson.
Definitely don't start Jefferson. He's a must.
So I couldn't find it, but I mean, so once they get off their bye, though, they've got Las Vegas, Cincinnati, Detroit, Green Bay. None of which are terrible matchups. Cincinnati and Detroit right there, weeks 15 and 16. Those are juicy matchups. So I would consider maybe starting Addison in those matchups once Jefferson's back, if you don't have better options. But like against Green Bay championship week, knowing that Hockenson and Jefferson are going to be above him in the pecking order, that's when it gets tough in the questionable matchups. And in the favorable matchups, it's more of a consideration because there might be more to go around. But once that schedule gets a little bit more difficult, that's when the decisions are going to get difficult.
Yep, you got it. That is news from around the NFL. Anyone that is watching on Twitter, we cannot see your question. So hop over to YouTube, like the stream, subscribe to the channel, drop a question in the chat, and we will answer it live on the air. We have Chris Burns with us, the Dynasty Deviant from the Dynasty 365 show from right here on the Fantasy in Frames Network. He was just on before us with Stacey Perez and Tyler Heil. Fellas, we got the guest here, so we got to put him on the spot in bussin', discussing, and mid. So let's get to it.
Go and try your luck. Test me in again, we let it rain. Please don't start us up. Got that black and white, that yin and yang. Mr. Officer, please don't search us. We don't.
All right, so bussin', discussing, and mid is some of our favorite, non-favorite, and safe plays of the week. Bussin', we're going to give you a player that we like outside of the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, and top 12 quarterbacks. Discussing a player that we don't like inside that framework. And mid is a player that we think is going to hit their floor, the safe play for week 13. So, Chris, considering you're the guest, we're going to have you go off the top. Who is your bussin' player for week 13, man?
All right. My busing player for week 13 is running back Jalen Warren, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's going against the Arizona Cardinals this week. Now, I know you all pay attention to these airways, and you may have heard Jalen Warren's name called last week, and, things happen. But I'm coming back again this week, and it's because I absolutely love this guy. So Warren, he's coming into week 13 with the expert consensus rankings at running back 22. I feel like that's a little low, and I'll tell you why I feel that's a little low. He's been trending up for the past month in his scoring. Of these last 4 games, he's had 2 top 10 finishes and 1 top 15 finish. It's pretty good. And now this is going to be his second game without Matt Canada. A lot of people have been blaming the ineptitude of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense on Canada, like blame Canada. He's not even a real coordinator anyway. So, and we saw this game when Canada wasn't the OC. With the new OC, Pickett was actually pushing the ball downfield. This is something that we have not seen him do like in a long time, since he was at Pitt, I guess. So like throwing the ball downfield, it opened up the run game. So last week, Jalen Warren, he saw 13 carries. Najee Harris, he had 15 carries. And, it was a Thanksgiving holiday week. So a lot of Najee owners were thankful for the first time of him being efficient in a very, very long time. And he actually was more efficient than Warren, and some people, they might worry that, as good as Najee Harris looked last week, that this split is going to go the wrong way for Jalen Warren. I'm not so sure about that. So in that game, if you watch that game, Warren, he fumbled the ball early. Najee, he rips off a 22-yard run. And it's just that Warren just really didn't get into the groove. He wasn't in his bag, like he was in that Cleveland game where we saw him, 125 yards rushing. And he was involved in the passing game. He had 3 targets. Najee didn't get any of the passing game work, and it's just the game was kind of off, But what helps fix an off game? Like if you're a running back and you have an off game, what's going to help you get right? The Arizona Cardinals. And that is exactly who he is playing, this week. He's going against the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals, they're coming all the way to the East Coast. And so far this season, they've been giving up 29 fantasy points per game on average to running backs. That is the 31st, ranked 31st in the league. The only team that is worse to giving it up to the running backs are the Denver Broncos. And we know that the Denver Broncos number is heavily skewed because of week 3 when they ran into that Miami mollywhopping. A-Chain and Mostert, they just ate their Chris Brooks. Everybody just went in there. They just ate them. So that's a little skewed. And when you look at the Cards, how they've been playing this year, they've been playing better than anybody's really thought they were going to be. Everybody's thinking they're going to be challenging for one of the worst teams in the league, but they've been pretty competitive. And now the collar's back. The offense, is keeping them in some games. So I think that game script is going to be more neutral than anything. I don't think it's going to be that 6.5 point spread that Vegas is predicting right now. I think it's going to be a little closer to that, which means that all these guys are going to stay on the field for the entire game and the production will be had. So back to that whole committee. It is absolutely a committee. It is a 50-50 committee. I don't think you'll ever see where either Najee or Jalen Warren are going to have a 70 to 30% share or even a 60-40. It's always going to be really close to that 50-50 split. And when you're dealing with committees, you want to get the running back that's going to get what you think are the most meaningful touches. And the way that Pittsburgh has played this year, it's not like they're spending a lot of time in that green zone, in the 10 from the 10 end zone, getting in there.
Nope.
So if they're between the 20s and Jalen Warren is getting that passing game work, I really think that he's going to get a lot of check downs from Pickett. And we know that he can break one if he gets it. So I'm really feeling good about that game against the Cardinals. I think it's going to be something where, Warren's going to make up for that game that he had last week, and he's going to show everybody that, I'm here to stay. And he wants to relegate Najee Harris back to his, fading into the background as he's been going like so.
The bench spot. I love it. Jalen Warren is going to be bussing this weekend, as you heard from Chris Burns right there. Great stuff as to why that's going to happen. Mainly because I mean, get right game, Arizona Cardinals, like you said, get right game for quarterbacks, get right game for wide receivers, get right game for running backs, get right game all around. Drew, hit us with your bussin' player for week 13, man.
If I'm being honest, I wanted to pick Michael Pittman for this segment because I think he's going to absolutely smash this weekend, but he's ranked far too high to be in consideration. So
May as well just pick AJ Brown.
That's right. I might as well pick Raheem Mostert. So give me the number 2 option in the Colts passing offense that I also think is going to have a day. So Josh Downs, he's my bussin' pick against the Tennessee Titans. He's second on the team in yards, despite being about 14% behind Alec Pierce in terms of routes run per team drop back. He's also second in target share, receiving yards per game, and yards per route run. And he's been the first read on the team's passing plays on 19% of the plays, but that's a very distant second to the unreal 36% of first read plays that Michael Pittman's seen. So just insane volume. But the point is, despite being a rookie, Josh Downs has been producing from week 1, where like typically with rookie receivers, I'm looking and waiting for that post-bye rookie bump. He hasn't needed that. Now, Josh Downs is only 1 week past his bye, so he has his post-bye rookie bump has started. And man, if there's any staying power to what we saw last week coming out of their bye, we're in for a treat with Josh Downs down the stretch. No pun intended. But against Tampa, this man saw 13 targets. Unfortunately, he was only able to bring in 5 of them. But at the same time, only 7 of the 13 targets were deemed catchable. Now, that was down considerably from the 77% catchable target percentage that he's seen on the year. So if he gets a similar amount of targets that he saw last year, but his catchable target percentage goes back up to what he's seen the rest of the year, I would expect a much more productive game than what you got last week on such a high target number. This week, Josh Downs gets a matchup against the Tennessee Titans secondary that's given up the 8th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the wide receiver position over the last 8 weeks. Fantasy Pros Week 13 ECR has him down at wide receiver 27, but I've got him up at wide receiver 21.
Yep. I love it, man. Start Josh Downs quickly around the frames. We'll start with the guests. Rest of the season, who you taking, Josh Downs or Jaden Reed?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Give me Josh Downs just because I trust that Indy offense a lot more than Green Bay's.
Drew?
Yeah, I can't talk him up and then go against him. So give me Josh Downs. I think that they'll have similar roles, and he has the easier schedule the rest of the way. So give me Downs.
Rhett?
I'm going to go contrarian here because I've seen the consistent production over the past month. Give me Jaden Reed. I think there's a rapport starting to be built there. I think Jordan Love is starting to come into his own in recent weeks. I mean, they got a nice thing going there. So,
yep. Speaking of nice things going, we're going to get to Rhett's bussin' pick for week 13, and that is a part of the New Orleans offense.
Oh my God. I didn't think I'd be here this season, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Derek Carr against the Detroit Lions feels like a good play this week, despite the wide receiver issues. And I'll tell you why. Walks into this week as the ECR quarterback 16. But when you look at this Detroit secondary and this defense, they're 27 versus quarterbacks in terms of points scored. So they've given up a lot of them. And when schedule adjusted, they're actually 28. So this secondary has not been great against quarterbacks, receivers, anything this year. So it is a great matchup. And I'm going to go ahead and shock you guys and tell you that Derek Carr, despite the way he has looked this season at times, he has sneaky been not awful overall. He has 2,535 passing yards, 65.6 completion percentage, and a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and actually has 5 300-yard games. And when he does that, he's outperformed his projection in all 5 of the weeks that he's had over 300 yards. And his advanced numbers, not bad. His 372 pass attempts are 10th in the league. He actually has 50 deep ball attempts, which are 4th in the league. The team is averaging 38.2 pass plays per game, which is 3rd in the league. They run a good pace. They run 2.21 plays per minute. That is 5th in the league. And he's actually 9th in the league in air yards with 2,768. So there are some inefficiencies with Derek Carr this year, and I get it. But we're so close and we can taste it based off of the advanced stats that if 1 or 2 things go his way, there's a big game coming in. It may just be this week because the Detroit Lions have given up 19 touchdown passes to quarterbacks so far this season. And in 4 of the 5 past weeks, they've given up 20 or more fantasy points to the position. The one exception was the Aiden O'Connell Las Vegas Raiders a couple weeks back, where they had 4.5 fantasy points given up. So
It's a fair exception.
That's a fair way of saying that if you're going to play Aiden O'Connell, good things probably will happen for your defense. So my projection this week, and I'm just going to go ahead and go out there. I think Alvin Kamara's in for a big week. I think Taysom's going to see a bigger load. I think Juwan Johnson's going to have a big week. Vegas has this over-under at 46 points, which tells me that Vegas expects points. So we should see maybe New Orleans break out of the shell a little bit this week. I'm just going to go out on the rail and say a big week for Derek Carr. A pick is probably going to come, but also with this game, I don't think the Saints win it. But if we see another 300-yard passing game and a couple of touchdown passes, I wouldn't be shocked. So put it on the board with Derek Carr and Rougarou. I hear you, but you know what? I got to ride for my guy at this point.
Yes, Rougarou. Thanks for joining in. Who dat, baby? So our bussin' players for week 13, the Dynasty Deviant went with Jalen Warren. Drew went with Josh Downs. And as you just heard, Rhett went with Derek Carr. That's our bussin' plays for week 13. Now we're going to hop into our discussin' plays. And again, Chris, as the guest, we'll let you lead off, man. This one's got some heat to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know that I'm going to make a lot of people mad with this one, but for this week, I am not loving, potential league winner Kyren Williams. Williams came back from IR last week, and he went full-on bussin' beast mode last week. I mean, he comes in 143 yards rushing, 61 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, truly a masterful game. And fantasy managers were feeling great, thinking he's there for the stretch, going to take them to the promised land when they get to the playoffs. And, rightfully so, you have to feel good about this. And I'm not saying that he is a bad play rest of season. But if you remember way back, like to a couple minutes ago, the bussin' section, when I asked that question, like, what does it take to fix a running back when they had an off game? Like, what's the fix? The answer was the Arizona Cardinals. So if you want to know what helps you have confidence when you come off the IR, it's the Arizona Cardinals. So everything that I just told you that Kyren Williams did last week, he did it against the Arizona Cardinals. So but I can't take it away from him. It's just great. So he comes in this week or whatever, and he's like the ECR RB5. But you know what he's not playing? He's not playing the Cardinals again. He's playing against that team that, is top 10 in limiting points to running backs this year. And that would be the Cleveland Browns. That Cleveland Brown defense has been so stingy when it comes to running backs. So until Jalen Warren put up that 125 yards on him 2 weeks ago, no running back had over 75 yards rushing against the Browns this season. Like Jonathan Taylor, he had 75 yards on the nose. But other than him, no one else had above 66 rushing yards. Some of those running backs, you may have heard of them: Kenneth Walker, Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon. And you're saying like, oh, they're kind of Christian McCaffrey, like he's pretty good, and he didn't do it. Derrick Henry, he didn't do it. And that Rams offense, I'm not going to say they're going to see the explosion that they saw last week against the Arizona Cardinals. This is a much better defense. Kupp, he's dealing with an ankle injury again. And so the Browns, they may actually just key in on Kyren and say, Matt, you got a bum elbow. You and Puka go out there and beat us. And if they do that, I really can see them slowing Kyren down a little bit. So for that reason, he is my discussing player of the week. And I know you guys are mad at me, but I still love you.
I actually don't hate that right there. Yeah, I actually don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. Great. Like you said, man, they're not playing the Arizona Cardinals, and the Cleveland Browns have been stout against running backs. But Chris, since Jalen Warren, like you said, was your bussin' pick for week 13, Slade asks here, should he play Jalen Warren or Rachaad White this week?
That's a good one. Let me see. Rachaad White, he's playing the Carolina Panthers, and that's also a team if you want to get right on the running game. Personally, I think that if it just comes down to all things being equal, I would have to take Rachaad White, like in this situation, just because he is not splitting time with, somebody like Najee Harris is with Jaylen Warren, So if he's getting that full complement, that means he's going to get out there, he's going to run the ball, he's going to catch those passes, everything. And who knows what the Carolina Panthers are going to be. I think you see most times that teams, after they lose a coach midseason, like the team rallies if they actually like the coach. I don't know if they like Frank Reich or if they're going to miss him. So I really don't know what to expect. But everything Carolina Panthers has just become so crazy to me that I don't know. But I take Rachaad White.
There you have it. You guys on the same boat? Rhett, Drew, Rachaad White over Warren?
Yep, sounds good.
Yep. I've got Warren as an RB2 this week, and I've got Rachaad White in my top 10. So, yeah, I'd say fire up White.
Yeah, and you can find Drew's rankings at www.fantasyinframes.com, along with everyone else's great articles, videos. There's dynasty rankings on there. There's the weekly rankings. There's DFS stuff. But Drew, where do you have your discussing pick in your rankings this week?
Oh, man, he is not a running back 2 this week, and that is going to be running back Brian Robinson versus the Miami Dolphins. So, whenever you look at Brian Robinson Jr., it's been much easier to project him for a good week in a matchup you would expect Washington to win versus a matchup you would expect them to lose. Now, personally, this week against Miami, you're welcome, Chris. I'm sorry, Jorge, but I would be picking Miami to beat Washington. So he's had 7 top 16 running back weeks on the year. 4 of those came in the Commanders' wins, and another one came in the week that Antonio Gibson missed due to injury. So in games where the Commanders have lost the game and Antonio Gibson has been active, he's had 2 top 16 finishes, and then the rest have been running back 24 or worse. Yeah, he still dominates the carries and wins or losses. That part doesn't really change. The difference comes in the passing game whenever Gibson is active. Gibson has a route percentage of 43% compared to Robinson's 28% in the games that they've lost. And this even includes the wild week 10 RB1 week that Robinson had, where he had 6 targets and 119 receiving yards, where if you look at the rest of his career, that game log looks like a pretty big outlier. So on top of the potential negative game script, the Commanders get a matchup against the Miami Dolphins defense that's been the 3rd toughest defense against the running back position based on schedule adjusted fantasy points over the last 8 weeks. So you've got a bad game script for Brian Robinson, a tough matchup based on what they've done the last 8 weeks. If you have a different outlook on the way this game shakes out than I do, you might not need to fade Robinson, but Fantasy Pros Week 13 ECR has him up at running back 21, and I've got him down at running back 26 as more of a flex play instead of a RB1 or 2 this week.
Yep, that's fair. Brian Robinson is disgusting this week, and our disgusting segment is chock full of running backs. Rhett, continue the trend. Who's your disgusting running back for week 13, brother?
It hurts my heart because I've been behind this guy all year, but we got to fade DeAndre Swift against San Francisco 49ers this week. Enters the week as the ECR running back 16, but it's a San Francisco defense that is 4th against running backs when you look at the schedule adjusted fantasy points. So I don't know if you know this about the San Francisco 49ers defense. They're pretty good unit right there. He leads that Philadelphia backfield, but as we kind of expected all year, Jalen Hurts sort of nerfs any red zone value he has, so that kind of hurts him long term as well. But for a guy with a 60+% snap share, he's sort of in a secondary role in this offense. Last week he only had 4% of receiving targets and only 25% of the total usage on the team. Between carries and targets, so 1 in every 4 plays. He was seeing the ball, and he's facing a 49ers defense that, like we said, is 4th against running backs and has only given up 20+ points to running backs twice this season. That was the Kyron Williams-led LA Rams and the Cleveland Browns. Both of these teams pretty good on the ground, but let's keep rolling. The Niners have given up a league-low 902 total rushing yards this season, 4.01 yards per carry. That's 10th best in the league. And they limit big plays. They have not given up a carry over 30 yards this season. And DeAndre Swift is a guy who is very much known for popping a big play here and there. So there's tough sledding ahead. And recently, he's kind of struggled versus elite defenses at 2.4 yards per carry against Dallas, 1.8 yards per carry against the New York Jets. And he has not had a 100-yard rushing game since week 2. So he's kind of settled into this spot where he's certainly a part of this offense, but he is not a focal point of this offense. He's been steady but unspectacular, and he's only outperformed his projection by four games this season. So I think there's a tough game ahead for DeAndre Swift. But that said, this is going to be a very fun football game to watch this week.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm excited for it. Rugaroo asks, I'd like to hear y'all pick a winner of this game, Philly versus San Francisco. We heard the talk last year coming out of San Francisco that if Brock Purdy didn't get hurt, that they would win the game. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles players don't agree with that. But I'd like to hear what your opinions are. Dynasty Deviant, Chris Burns, who's your pick to win the game?
Okay, first of all, last year the Eagles would, we're going to win that game regardless of if Purdy got hurt or not. This year, San Francisco is going to roll. I think the 49ers are going to come out there like we've seen when they play and they're healthy. When they play healthy, they're the best team in the league. They have not looked like they did like that game, before they went on that little skid or whatever. Everybody's back healthy. I mean, they look like the most dominant team in the league. That defense is going to give them fits. 49ers all day.
Drew?
Man, you see the Rams jersey right here above my head. I'm not about to pick the 49ers. Fly, Eagles, fly, man. I picked the Panthers to beat the 49ers. What are we doing here?
Rhett, who you got?
I'm going to go ahead and pick Philadelphia as well in this game.
Philly?
I think when you're 10-1, you kind of have to give that some respect and tip the cap. So you're alone on this one, Burnsy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they always just seem to find a way to pull out the wins, man. Week in and week out, Philadelphia Eagles, dudes. Too bad their only loss was against the New York Jets. That's our discussing picks for the week. Burns went with Kyron Williams. Drew went with Brian Robinson. And Rhett went with DeAndre Swift. Now we're going to give you our mid plays of week 13, players that we think are going to, at the very least, hit their floors, are safe players for the week. Burns, let's keep it consistent, brother. Lead us off, man.
All right. So for my mid player of the week, I'm going with quarterback Kenny Pickett from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm picking on the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I promise you guys, I did not realize this because I didn't do it all at one time and everything. But then when I was looking at it, oh man, I really picked this game. But I already told you that Arizona gives it up to running backs. So you shouldn't be surprised to learn that they give up the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks as well. Pickett's, his hands may be small, but this game, my man, his performance is going to be probably mid also. Last week against the Bengals, Pickett, he got it. I mean, he threw it 24 of 30. He completed 24 of 33 passes for 278 yards. And as I said, it was like the first time that we've seen a different look at the Steelers offense. They opened it up. They amassed 421 total yards. And that first without Canada. And you might be surprised, 421, that's not anything crazy. But do you know that is the first time that the Steelers offense had over 400 total yards in the last 59 games? So it looks completely different. So expect that offense to open it up more moving forward. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, my man Patty Fries, all these guys are going to get in, catch some passes. I mean, it's going to be a big game for Pittsburgh, even though I still think it's going to be relatively close. I do think the Steelers are going to get in there and show out. So Pickett, for that reason, is my mid.
Yeah. I don't hate the pick and play considering the amount of buys we have in the QBs that are out if you're chasing points or if you just want that safe play, like you said. I mean, Kenny Pickett is as mid as it gets when it comes to the quarterback position. Drew, Jaylen Warren was Chris's bussin' play for week 13. His counterpart is your mid. Tell us why.
Yeah, we really are picking on the Cardinals. And I agree with Chris's pick, too. I like the Jaylen Warren call. But I think you can play both running backs from the Steelers this week. It's a very small 1-week sample, and I'm blown away by what Chris told us about how in-depth the Steelers offense has been for so long. I didn't realize it had been that long. That is
59
insane.
games.
That is insane. But now that they are free from Matt Canada, in that very small sample, we saw Najee with 15 rushing attempts for 99 yards and a touchdown. And as Chris mentioned, Warren also had 13 rushing attempts for 49 yards. And Warren did run 6 more routes and was more productive in the passing game, which I think that's what most of us would expect to see from this backfield. That's pretty much how I would expect for it to shake out. In total, Najee played 54% of the snaps, and I think that'll be more than enough for a mid-fantasy performance against the Arizona Cardinals. Over the last 8 weeks, the Cardinals have been the third best matchup for fantasy running backs based on schedule-adjusted fantasy points given up to the position, and they've given up the 5th most touchdowns to running backs on the year as well. While the Steelers might not get in the scoring zone a ton, I think that, Najee could get an opportunity or two in this game. And if I told you that Najee Harris led the league with 11 rushes of 15-plus yards, would you believe me?
Yes.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't have either, but Underdog put that out there today, and I was mind blown whenever I saw it. The man leads the league in rushes of 15-plus yards. Wild to me. And so I think he could rack up a couple more of those against Arizona as well. So it might not feel great, but I think that this is a very mid-flexible week for Najee. Fantasy Pros Week 13 ECR had him at running back 26. I've got him slightly ahead of that at running back 17.
All right. There you go. Running back 17 is as mid as it gets. And that's what we're doing here with this mid segment. So we've had Kenny Pickett. We've had Najee Harris. Rhett, my only guess is that your mid pick is George Pickens to finish off the quartet of Pittsburgh Steelers players that we've had today on Fourth and Frames.
It's not, but we are going to stay in the division. So let's talk some David Njoku against the Los Angeles
There
Rams.
you go. Yeah.
Guys, I don't know if you realize this, but doing research today, David Njoku has been sneaky good all season long. He's had 6 consecutive tight end 1 finishes the past 6 weeks. And he's playing an LA Rams defense who is 29th versus tight ends, according to fantasy points scored. He's been a focal point of this Cleveland passing game since week 7. I'm going to give you these target numbers: 9, 8, 6, 9, 15, and 9. So David Njoku getting fed right now. And the LA Rams defense has given up 10 or more fantasy points to the tight end position 6 times since week 4, and that's including a week 10 bye. So more than likely, the tight end position is getting theirs against the Los Angeles Rams in recent weeks. He's been a key part of this Cleveland offense. He's at a 20+% target share every week since the streak's begun. He's played 70+% of snaps all season long. And he's been steady, and he's done that despite only scoring 2 touchdowns this season. Cleveland trusts him, and he's on the road this week. And looking at the splits, David Njoku has been better on the road than has been at home this season. 9.2 points per game on the road versus 6.4 fantasy points at home, and 59 receiving yards per game on the road versus 33 yards at home. So David Njoku on the road has been very solid all year long. And that's another one of those spots where slowly but surely and nice and steady, the Joker can produce another big game. So this week, give me 5 catches, give me 51 yards, give me a touchdown, give me another solid David Njoku low-end tight end 1 week. And if you're having that guy in the tight end position where it's a wasteland, any steady production you can get is good production. So David Njoku is a solid play right now.
Love it, man. The target share that he's had has been of an elite tight end. But I got to ask, with the fact that Dorian Thompson-Robinson may be out this week with the head injury and the uncertainty at quarterback, not too sure who's going to play.
Oh, so it's Flacco.
It's elite Joe Flacco. Are we trusting Njoku in that situation with Joe Flacco? Yes.
Is it Joe Flacco playing quarterback, or is it PJ Walker?
It's probably going to be PJ Walker, which I guess
I thought I saw something about Flacco taking first team snaps. I don't know how true it was. I'm just saying it's a possibility. We might see Joe Cool, Mr. Elite.
All I'm gonna say is this: is that it doesn't really matter who's playing quarterback. You can probably expect a lot of safety net dump offs this week.
Yeah,
putting that out there.
That's where you're gonna go. The only thing with that is, are they going to be able to move the ball downfield enough for him to be in the opportunity to catch a touchdown? But it's gonna be there with the Rams because, like you said, the Rams have been atrocious against the position. So that's bussin', discussing, and mid for week 13 are bussin' players: Jalen Warren, Josh Downs, Derek Carr. Our discussing players: Kyron Williams, Brian Robinson, DeAndre Swift. And our mid players: Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, and David Njoku. Again, to anyone that's watching on Twitter, we cannot see your comments, so head over to YouTube, drop a comment in the chat, and we will answer it live on air. We have the Dynasty Deviant himself, Chris Burns, with us on the show today from the Dynasty 365 show, which was on just before us with Stacey Perez and Tyler Heil. You can find Chris at Dynasty Deviant on X. Fellas, another great bussin', discussing, and mid in the books. But let's get into Master Debation. So Drew's been cleaning up in this segment. He's been winning every week. So we had to bring in a special guest judge, and that is the Dynasty Deviant himself, Chris Burns. A little bit of just secular opinion. He's not going to be, he's not going to have Drew, in his ear with his lean back and his smirk and all that stuff, so we don't have to worry about too much of Drew's mind games with Chris Burns. But because
You're trying to cook the books already. Look at you, man.
but because Drew is the top G in this segment, he gets to be the judge at the top as well with Chris Burns. So Drew, hit us with what you got, man.
All right, so first debate, it's a week 13 wide receiver gross off or a flex off, however you want to look at it. We're going to look at Chris. You're going to tell us why you should flex Christian Watson. Rhett, you're going to tell us why you should flex Jahan Dotson. And then we're going to let our special guest judge here let the viewers know who won. So, Rhett, let us know, man, why is Jahan Dotson the flex off this week?
First off, I'd like to thank our beautiful guest judge, Chris Burns, for joining us tonight. I'd like to let you know that we have finally got a nice, beautiful drop of chocolate in this podcast, and I'm all for it. But to go ahead and let's talk about it. Let's talk about Jahan Dotson. Both have home games this week, he and Christian Watson. But give me Jahan Dotson, and here's why. They're playing the Miami Dolphins, so we need to get ready for some points. And they are a pretty heavy underdog in this game. I believe a 9.5-point dog. So looking like the Washington Commanders are going to have to throw the ball a ton. Just to get into the spot. 9.5-point spread, which projects the Washington Commanders probably at about 20 points for the week, which means with a negative game script, we're implying 2 touchdowns for the Washington Commanders this week, somewhere in there, which means in a passing game, Jahan Dotson, we might get to fire him up this week. Christian Watson, your man, Chris Battistell, playing an elite Kansas City Chiefs defense. They've mostly both been wide receiver 1 to 3 since week 8. That being said, Christian Watson has only had one wide receiver 1 or 2 finish this week. You know when that was? It was last week. So last week in a Thanksgiving game where they got well ahead and, they kind of just did their thing. So, yes, we're going to say this. Jahan Dotson, better matchup, better production consistently since week 8 on, which means targets are coming. Jahan Dotson is the answer in this situation.
Keyword you used in your argument there, Rhett, was you might be able to start Jahan Dotson, but this week you are going to be able to start Christian Watson. No mights, no ifs, no maybes about it. Watson on the Green Bay Packers has been the statistical leader in almost every category. If you're looking from week 1 till now, or the sample size over the last 3 weeks, and you compare Christian Watson to Jahan Dotson, it's not even a comparison. Targets, 19% to Jahan Dotson, 10%. A-dot, 17.56 to Jahan Dotson's 9. End zone targets, 68.99% of Green Bay's end zone targets have gone to Christian Watson over the last 3 weeks. If you look at Jahan Dotson, measly 8%. PPR, he's averaging about 11.33 points over that span. And Jahan Dotson, only 7. You think about the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room, you think about Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, but over the last 3 weeks, Watson has held more of a target share, higher A-dot, much more higher percentage of the red zone targets. Like I mentioned, that 68% of the red zone targets over the last 3 weeks compared to Romeo Doubs' 18%. And what that telling me is when Green Bay gets down to the money zone, Christian Watson is who they try to cash in. This week, like you said, he does got the elite Kansas City Chiefs defense, who are top 10 against the wide receiver. But when you break down the wide receivers that have played the Kansas City Chiefs, the wide receivers that have had a high amount of success, a Snoop Dogg amount of success has been the wide receivers that line up out wide. Jacoby Myers, 6 receptions, 79 yards, 1 touchdown. Devonta Smith, 6 receptions, 99 yards. Jerry Jeudy scoring the only touchdown of his year against the Chiefs. All these wide receivers, high percentage of lining up on the outside. That game against the Chiefs for Jerry Jeudy was when he lined up on the outside, the highest amount of his season this year. And of course, Josh Palmer, 5 catches, 133 yards, second highest percentage of snaps lined up out wide in that game versus the Chiefs. Chicks dig the deep ball. Jordan Love is first in deep ball attempts in the NFL. Christian Watson is the wide receiver for an A-Dot. And everything that I just told you about the Kansas City Chiefs letting up points in numbers against the wide receiver is going to equal success for Christian Watson this week. And that is why you should start Watson over Dotson.
All right. Good arguments for both sides. Donnie, what did you have a closing argument, Rhett? Did you have a rebuttal?
You don't get a rebuttal.
I heard him take a deep breath there.
Look, he can go fancy numbers all he wants, and he's talking about A-Dot, but all I know is this: it's average depth of target. That doesn't necessarily mean receptions. Which, if I've looked at the numbers, Christian Watson has not exactly been on fire, and I think your 11.33 over the past 3 games is heavily skewed by that 21-point game last week. But keep doing what you do, boo.
I don't need a rebuttal. My first argument stood for itself. Can't take that stuff away.
Mr. Dynasty Deviant, they both presented good cases. We needed an impartial judge to make a ruling here. So who are you rolling with, Christian Watson or Jahan Dotson as a flex play this week?
Yeah, great arguments. Rhett, I want to let you know that flattery will get you everywhere. But I can't go with an impartial judgment. Chris B, this goes to you. I'm taking Christian Watson.
Don't know if it's the argument. Don't know if it's they share the same name, but hey, a win is a win. So it doesn't matter how you get them.
Did you guys just hear that ding? It was the money going through on his PayPal.
It was a very good argument. It was a very good argument. Like, I agree with what he was saying. When it comes to just trusting between these two, I don't trust Jahan Dotson right now. And I mean, he's playing against a juggernaut. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard about this team, like from Miami, but those guys are pretty awesome. So, yeah. Impartial judge.
All right, there it is. So that's 1 for me, 0 for Rhett. Rhett, now it's your time to deliver your argument piece.
All right, so I wanted to go outside of the box this week, and I wanted to have you guys round 2. We're going to have a good linebackers on bad teams IDP edition. So, Chris, I want you to take New York Giants linebacker Bobby Okereke, and Drew, you get Buffalo linebacker Terrell Bernard, and we're going to go, as we traditionally do, alphabetical order. Chris Battistel, you have the floor first.
All right, Drew. I hope you're ready. 6'1", 235 pounds. When I Google searched Bobby Okereke, I got directions to the nearest Indian grocer to pick up the ingredients for my curry recipe, but that's not what I wanted. What I wanted was the PFF deep dive into Bobby Okereke, 14th ranked LB on PFF compared to Terrell Bernard being the 49th ranked PFF LB. Close in points per game when you're looking at what they produce using fantasy and frames IDP scoring, what you should be doing at the end of the day. Yes, Terrell Bernard has the sacks, but looking at the pressures, which are the same, and the high amount of hurry-ups, Bobby OK will make it to the QB eventually. 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, 4 pass breakups. Bobby is leading in total tackles, nearly 20 more solos, and a better missed tackle percentage than Terrell Bernard. That's right, Drew. Hit up those keys. Try to find that little advantage. You're not gonna get it today. Almost 100 more snaps inside the tackle box, which leads to the higher number of tackles. Bobby is on the field more. Over the last 3 weeks, the Giants are last in time of possession for the offense, averaging 24 minutes through that time. And what does that equal? Like I said, more playing time for Bobby O. Whereas Terrell Bernard on the Bills has the 7th ranked offense in time of possession. Over the last 3 weeks, that's over the last 3 weeks, 12th ranked offense in that category over the full season. Keep it simple. Playing time plus volume equals fantasy points. And Bobby OK is going to be the more consistent producer down the stretch because of those two factors. And that's why he should be trusted more than Terrell Bernard.
Are you done? Okay, that was Bobby OK, but let me give you an actual good debate here. So if you're going to ask me to debate IDP, you might as well ask me to debate soccer or pickleball. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but look, I've never had a football debate I didn't like. So both these guys have played 12 games. They've had the same amount of assisted tackles, but Bernard is the only guy that sacks the quarterback here. He's had 3 sacks compared to Bobby OK's 0. And you said, hey, he's going to get him eventually. Bernard has more sacks this year than Okerke's ever had in a single season in his entire career. The man's been in the league for like 5 years now. So, we can't wait forever to get these sacks. We're getting old over here. You know what I mean? So I don't know how long we're supposed to wait, but we're waiting. He has 5 quarterback hits compared to 2 for Okereke. He's got more interceptions and more fumble recovery. So Bobby OK, his fantasy output has simply been one-dimensional. The man just gets the boring, regular old tackles, whereas Terrell Bernard, he spices things up. You're doing this little thing right here. He salt bays it a little bit, puts a little spice on it. I like spice on my food, all right? He's got some turnovers, some sacks in there. So Bobby OK, he's kind of like the linebacker positions version of David Montgomery, all right? He's a running back 1 on the year, but his production's all coming one way. Whereas with Terrell Bernard, he's a little bit more like Travis Etienne. He's a running back 1, too, but he's giving it to you in multiple facets, all right? So not to mention with this being Terrell Bernard's first season as the Bills' starting middle linebacker, he's only going to continue to get better as the season goes on. Bobby OK, he's been in the season. He's in the middle of his 5th year. He's the man. He's all right, but we know what he is at this point. All right, Bernard hadn't even hit his ceiling yet. Bernard's top 12 in pressures among linebackers, and he has a 14.6% tackle rate compared to Bobby OK's 14.2% tackle rate. So if the tackle percentages are going to be virtually the same, give me the guy with the upside of sacks and more frequently targeted linebacker, while the other teams just continue to run the ball against the Giants, and he just continues to rack up them boring old tackles. So both guys are virtually playing, similar snaps. They're damn near back-to-back in fantasy points per game, as you so eloquently mentioned. So, and I didn't even mention that in the Week 12 rankings last week, both Jorge and Nate had my guy like 5 spots ahead of Bobby OK. So, the fantasy and frame guys seem to like my guy too. So I'm just saying the guy brings some excitement to your life. Give me the excitement. Give me the spice. Give me Terrell over Mr. OK.
All right. Rhett, Chris, what's the rule of the roost here? Who won the debate? Is it going to go to Terrell Bernard or Bobby OK?
For that debate, good arguments, guys. But I have to go with, I like a little bit of spice, so I got to go with Terrell Bernard on that one.
You did it again, Drew. But yeah, all right. That's fair. We'll give it to you. So we went Christian Watson. Rougarou actually went with Jahan Dotson in the chat, Rhett. So you gotta tally there. You gotta win there. So we went with Christian Watson over Jahan Dotson, Terrell Bernard over Bobby Okereke. And now it's my turn to deliver the argument to you guys. And this time we're going to argue rookie running backs. Rhett's going to argue Jahmyr Gibbs. And Drew's going to argue Bijan Robinson. And we're going to let Drew take the floor.
Oh, man, I don't like going first. All right. So, if you would have asked me this question a month ago, I probably would have been on Rhett's side too. I probably would have taken Jahmyr Gibbs. But rest of season, it appears that my best friend Arthur Smith might have at least somewhat come to his senses. He's finally treating Bijan Robinson like the best running back on his team. Over the Falcons' last 2 games, Bijan has 38 carries, which is 20 more than Tyler Algier. He's also still running more routes during that time with 35 routes compared to Algier's 13. And possibly the biggest development, the thing I've been screaming for over the last 2 games, you ask, Bijan Robinson has 75% of the team's carries inside the 10 and 100% of the team's carries inside the 5. Arthur Smith is finally giving the generational running back the ball in scoring range. It's like a fucking miracle. Now, the big difference between Bijan and Gibbs is that Gibbs' teammate in the backfield is actually also talented. So since his return from injury following their Week 9 bye, David Montgomery has more rushing attempts, the same amount of rushing touchdowns, and just 1 less carry inside the 5. Now, Gibbs is going to handle the passing work. There's no doubt about that. But so is Bijan. And now he's also become the main guy on the ground as well. The only reason that Bijan's receiving numbers took a hit at any point is because Arthur, for some reason, thought that Taylor Heineke was going to be an upgrade over the offense. But he was only a downgrade for Bijan. Prior to Desmond Ritter's benching, Bijan saw 5 targets a game and 31.5 receiving yards a game. With Taylor Heineke at quarterback, those numbers went down to 3.7 targets a game and 6.3 receiving yards a game. Taylor Heineke also thinks it's a bad idea to give your best player the ball. No wonder Arthur Smith liked him so much. But in Ritter's first game back as a starter, we're right back in business, baby. 6 targets, 32 receiving yards, and a touchdown for Bijan Robinson. Now, the most beautiful part of all of this is this workload for Bijan is coming just in time for him to have the second easiest strength of schedule for fantasy running backs from weeks 13 to 17 based on schedule adjusted fantasy points to the position. And all 3 of the Falcons matchups in the fantasy playoffs are the 3rd, 4th, and 6th best matchup for running backs, while the Lions have to play the Minnesota Vikings in week 16, who have been the 5th most difficult matchup for fantasy running backs on the year. So now that Bijan is finally getting the workload he deserves, the choice is clear. Give me the player getting more work with an easier schedule, who in my opinion is the more talented player. We have finally made it. League winner Bijan Robinson is here, baby.
All right. Rhett, tell us why Jahmyr Gibbs is the play over Bijan Robinson.
I'm so glad that Drew made part of my case for me. And I was even going to take that opening bullet if you'd let me go first and talk about how Atlanta had the better schedule going down the stretch. That's fine. But let me just boil this down for you. He's saying Arthur Smith may have seen the light. He is still Arthur Smith, and he is still an inferior coach to Dan Campbell, first and foremost. Let's look at these last 5 weeks per player profile of finishes. Jahmyr Gibbs, running back 3, running back 1, running back 2, running back 3. Last week, running back 27. So not great, but relatively solid. Bijan Robinson, running back 57, running back 18, 37. Then he gets an uptick, running back 12, and last week, running back 3. So who's been better consistently all season long? Jahmyr Gibbs. 4th in running back receptions, which, as we know, is a better metric for more consistent fantasy production, especially in half and full PPR situations. Number 9 in fantasy points per opportunity at 0.97 points per opportunity. 6th in fantasy points per game, 10th in yards per route run, 4th in target share among running backs, and not to mention 5th in yards per touch and an 8.2% breakaway rate, which is 4th in the league. He is out-touched Bijan Robinson in the red zone for the season, 18-17. Small advantage, but an advantage nonetheless. So, yes, let's give him his flowers. Atlanta has the better schedule down the stretch. But Jahmyr Gibbs, better coach, better system, and more valuable touches for fantasy production, red zone, receptions. He's outproduced Bijan Robinson in all these areas. I'm sorry, Drew. I know that's your guy, but I got to drag you this time. Give me Jahmyr Gibbs.
2 very, very solid arguments.
Hey, if this was a what have you done for me lately, who was better the first half of the season, you would have took the cake on that one.
That's also fair, but not part of the argument. So, Chris, please disregard what Drew just said.
Stricken from the record.
Striking from the record. What's your call, guest judge?
All right. So for me, I mean, that rest of season schedule, I mean, that's nice and all, but that's just kind of like saying, yeah, I kissed a girl and it was my sister. Give me Jahmyr Gibbs. Rhett takes it. It is decided. You can't trust Arthur Smith with anything. So give me Gibbs.
There it is. Drew finally loses in master debation.
I feel like Michael Jordan right now. I'm holding a tablet, and I took that personally. I'm watching Bijan again for weeks 13 to 17. We're going to see.
And lost to the man who was called Cheddar Bob in this segment last week. Let's drive that home, too. So,
hey, to your credit, Rhett, you landed the plane this week, man. You said what you needed to say, and you got out. You landed the plane. Well done, man. Well done.
Yeah, well done all around. Quickly, we're going to ring the alarm before we head over to shoot the gap. So ring the alarm players for the week. Rhett, just quickly off the top, Austin Eckler, season stats, 428 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 29 receptions, 286 yards with the 1 receiving touchdown. Bad over the last 2 games, RB32, RB36, averaging 6.45 points over those 2 games. Are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on Austin Eckler?
We're canceling the alert because he has a friendly schedule the rest of the way. Sees Denver twice, sees Las Vegas, sees Buffalo. The playoff calendar is looking nice. Kansas City, week 18, but the fantasy season is over by then. He still has 72.8% of Los Angeles' fantasy points, and he's still the RB10 in fantasy points per game, despite these slow weeks that he's had. People, everything's going to be fine with Austin Eckler. Don't panic. The volume, the usage, and the trust is all there. Cancel the alert on Austin Eckler.
Yep, fair enough. All right, Drew. Chris Godwin, 82 targets, 53 receptions, 606 yards, only 1 touchdown on the year. Wide receiver 44 in points per game, wide receiver 39 in total points. Last 4 outings, only averaging 5.72 half-point PPR points through that times. He's got the Panthers, Saints, and Falcons 3 games over his next few. Ring the alarm or cancel the alert on Chris Godwin.
Yeah, we're going to full on ring the alarm on this one, which is painful because I love Godwin, the player, but apparently the guys drawing up the plays for Tampa do not love Godwin as much as I do. Last year, Godwin averaged almost 3 manufactured touches per game, and that number is down to 0.6 per game. The manufactured screens that he had so much success with the last several years, they just haven't been there. And I think that's also a big reason for the lack of touchdowns as well, because some of those in the red zone led to some nice touchdown plays. So he's still running the highest route percentage on the team. He's second in target share, but as you mentioned, the touchdowns just haven't been there, and that's killed him as well, as long as the lack of manufactured plays. Now, on top of the struggles he's already had, he gets gifted with the second most difficult schedule for fantasy receivers from weeks 13 to 17 based on schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position. So you could argue his only plus matchup left the rest of the year is week 16 against Jacksonville. And even in plus matchups, it hasn't been that great for Godwin. So as a Chris Godwin fan, I'm just kind of hoping that Tampa cuts him this offseason and he can go somewhere where he can be properly used. But for the rest of this year, you've got to ring the alarm.
Yep, fair enough. And finally, Chris Cooper Kupp, wide receiver, Los Angeles Rams, season output, 27 receptions, 393 yards, 1 touchdown. He has missed the 4 games, wide receiver 47 in points per game. He's averaging 4.14 fantasy points over his last 5, and he's averaging a wide receiver 64 finish through that span. 3 of his next 5 matchups, again, against stout competitors. Are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on Cooper Kupp?
I am ringing the alarm. I'm sounding the alarm. I'm banging the alarm. Hell, send Paul Revere if you have to. Kupp, he's past the age apex for wide receivers, and unfortunately, my man cannot stay on the field. And his injuries that he's having are kind of weird. Like the one where he went on the pup early in the season, which is weird, unsolved mystery-esque. Needs to have that creepy, like, the truth is out there music behind it. Being a ghost last week, there's rumors that he re-aggravated that ankle injury. And right now you have to be alarmed, and I'm not looking for much from him the rest of the season.
Yep, that's fair. All right, Chris, thank you for joining the show. We appreciate your time. I know you grinded on Dynasty 365, and then you joined us here on 4th and Frames. Make sure you stick around for Shoot the Gap directly after this show. But as we do for all our guests, The frame is yours. Let the people know where to find you. Let them know what you got going on inside of fantasy football, outside of fantasy football. Let us have it, man.
All right, so you can find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it X at Dynasty Deviant, where you see me, like I just put content out there to kind of make you feel good, kind of make you laugh, do things like that. Also some articles out in the fantasyandframes.com. And, now that my work schedule, has freed up a little bit, you probably will see me like around like, this fantasy sphere in different places. But I'm always out there. Like, feel free to DM me, ask questions. Very personable, like easy to get along with. And I just enjoy making people feel good, enjoy making people happy. So that's what it's all about. And I appreciate you guys for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. And I look forward to next time.
Yes, sir.
One of the best genuine people in this fantasy business, man.
Mhm.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we connected through the Scott Fishbowl hopefuls chat, and then cheering each other on, watching those races. And then when I heard that you were coming on with Fantasy and Frames, I was over the moon. I was so excited. I let them know that they got a real one, and we appreciate you coming on the show today. For Drew at Drew3MR, for Rhett at R Manual Sports, I am Chris Battistel. Toodles.